The kids adored Aaron, and it sounded as though they wanted to throw him a surprise party. "It's such a sweet idea, especially when you think they came up with it themselves. I just wish things weren't so awkward with, you know." Awkward. Nee stopped short at the word, her call of greeting frozen on her lips. Heart dropping with a knowing premonition, she waited anxiously for Mia's response. "I know." Mia sounded sympathetic and resigned in equal measures. "But we can't keep ignoring the situation." Kiki sighed. "You're right, but I don't want them thinking I've manufactured a situation to force them to face each other. But how can we possibly have a party for Aaron without Luke there?" Nee sagged against the cool plaster wall, shivering from more than the cool air gusting through the open door behind her. The soft, familiar voices of her sisters continued their discussion, but she couldn't make out the words over the pounding of her heartbeat in her ears. Tightness filled her lungs, and the walls of the cloakroom seemed to constrict around her. She had to get out, had to get away. Reaching blindly for a jacket, she spun on her heel and fled across the grass. A bitter voice whispered in her ear, "That's right, run away, just like you always do." Nee huddled deeper into the padded jacket she'd borrowed from the row of pegs beside the back door at Butterfly House. The sleeves hung past the tips of her fingers, and the material smelled faintly of the kind of citrusy scent that spoke of aftershave rather than perfume. She hadn't stopped long enough to examine her choice, just grabbed for the first one her hand reached as she flew out of the kitchen and into the beautiful, sprawling garden behind the guest house. Her headlong flight carried her down the flagstone path to the short flight of steps leading to the beach. Only once her shoes sank into the soft, pale sand did she slow her frantic pace. The thick fleece collar blocked the worst of the wind howling in across the open water, and she narrowed her eyes against the sting of sand whipped up by its fury. The approaching storm transformed Butterfly Cove from a seaside idyll into a wild, desolate space. The normally gentle waters churned and roiled as though a monstrous beast twist below the surface. Gone was the peaceful blue blanket she'd grown accustomed to over the summer, replaced by a murky, grey-green morass. Dark clouds scudded across the sky, and the first icy drops of rain hit her raw cheeks. It had to be rain because, after the past few weeks, Nee was sure there wasn't a tear left inside her. The rain fell harder, fat cold drops that soon plastered her short blonde hair flat against her skull. Her face began to ache, a combination of the harsh bite of the wind and the desperate clench of her jaw. Everything was such a bloody mess, and she had no one to blame but herself. Luke had committed no sin, unless falling in love with her could be considered a sin. A bubble of hysteria formed a tight knot at the top of her chest. He would probably consider it more of a curse, and who would blame him when she'd done the unthinkable and left him alone in their marriage bed without a word? Her decision to leave had made sense at the time. They'd acted impetuously. Wouldn't be the first couple to confuse a heady rush of lust with something deeper. Better to make a quick break, go out on a high before the humdrum reality of life crept in and shattered their perfect fantasy. The hurt would fade, leaving fond memories of a foolish summer love. All perfectly sensible and rational conclusions, and every one a complete and utter lie. The moment she'd seen him staring at her across the platform, the one hope she'd clung to, that Luke had moved on without her, had been destroyed. She'd put her own ambition before his heart, and ruined both their lives in the process. "One cannot make true art without first suffering, my dear." The only voice she hated more than her own guilt intruded on her thoughts, and Nee raised her hands to her temples. She squeezed her fists into the sides of her head, as though applying the right amount of pressure could force him back into the skittering darkness of her deepest subconscious. It didn't help. The moment she let her guard down, he was there. Staring out across the tossing waves, Nee could almost sense him reaching out across the miles to drag her back across the ocean. "I won't come back. You can't have me."